Nick Harris, Star Telegram, with us now here on The Fan. And a good afternoon, Nick. How you doing?
Yeah, sorry about that. Take two. Doing well, fellas. How are y'all?
We're doing well. You know, even though the Cowboys lost, I feel like there's some reasons to be optimistic and positive about these next 16 games. Is there hope in there for you?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Brian Schottenheimer was very insistent last night. Actually, most people in the locker room were insistent last night that there's no moral victories to take away from it. You know, the loss in the loss column, it still counts the same as the 34-6 and 41-7 losses they took last year to the Eagles. But I feel a lot better coming out of this game about this team than I maybe did going in. You know, a lot of concerns that I maybe had on defense, they were, you know, answered in the second half. Maybe not completely, but I think there's a lane for those answers to be had. My offense is certainly encouraging too.
What we saw in the second half as far as stopping the Eagles' run game, do you think that's replicatable? Like, was that a big step in the right direction that we saw at halftime and then there with the weather break?
Yeah, it was a huge step in the right direction. I think you saw Kenny Clark really get comfortable in that front for the Cowboys. You know, he's still learning how to play next to all of these guys. You know, 9 seasons in a specific system. It's going to take a little time to, you know, get used to some other faces that you're playing with on the D-line and, you know, a different system as well. But you saw him really kind of settle in that third quarter and how big of an addition he is going to be. I think you saw a little bit of a glimpse of that there in the second half. I mean, there was a stretch for Saquon Barkley where he had 7 carries for just 1 yard in the second half, and that's huge, especially against a running back of that caliber and against an offense of that caliber. It was really encouraging to see.
I agree with you 100% on Maris Leofau. I saw you tweeting about that last night. I was like, why is Maris not getting more snaps? What stood out to you about the linebacking core in general?
Yeah, I didn't love the play from the second level. You know, if I had to pick one big red flag from the game defensively, I would be pointing at that linebacking core, you know, led by Kenneth Murray and Jack Sanborn. You know, even at times when I feel like they did get into the right position to make plays and running lanes, they weren't able to finish the play, but it was very rare that they were even in good position to make plays. I mean, in that first half, you saw Saquon Barkley, A.J. Dillon, Will Shipley. It was basically anybody they wanted to roll out there at running back, they were picking up positive yardage. And then Jalen Hurts just being able to scramble and make plays with his legs. That was just so killer there in that first half. And if you're looking at probably the biggest thing that hurt the defense last night, it was Jalen Hurts' legs. And not having a spy with the athleticism of a guy like Maris Leofau, it would have made sense, I would have thought, in my eyes. But, you know, going back and seeing the snap counts and seeing Leofau only get 6 defensive snaps compared to the 62 for Murray, I believe it was 41 for Sanborn, and even Damone Clark was in the high 30s. That really surprised me. You know, coming out of training camp, I thought Maris Leofau was the most athletic of that group, could probably give you more sideline-to-sideline range out of anybody in that group. But, you know, he wasn't trusted on the field last night, and that's an interesting thing for me.
Nick, how long before you think they get blue on the game day roster?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, too. You know, coming out of training camp in the preseason, I think it was maybe a little bit closer than some had expected as far as, you know, him making the 53. I don't think he was ever in jeopardy of missing the 53, but, you know, I think there was at least a discussion had, and I guess I didn't take that, you know, as seriously as I maybe should have, because I expected him to be on the game day roster and, you know, to get some early season opportunities. So it surprised me when he was inactive yesterday. You know, if it were me, I mean, I would be trying to find touches. He's, I think, the most explosive guy in that running back room. Sure, there might have to be some things that he has to work on from a game knowledge perspective, but, you know, overall, I think that type of speed, you have to bet on it. And you think to that Miles Sanders 49-yard run yesterday, I don't think Jaden Blue gets caught on that run, you know, and that's nothing against Miles Sanders. You know, that was a really good job of him to find that big hole in the big game. But, you know, when he follows it up with a fumble a couple of carries later, you think about those things. So, you know, hopefully you'll see some Jaden Blue next week.
Nick Harris with you, Star Telegram here on The Fan. What do you think about CeeDee Lamb? Do you have confidence he's going to be securing catches?
Yeah, it was very uncharacteristic, right? I mean, the 4 drops that he had in that game last night, not only a career high for him, but it's more drops than any NFL receiver has had in a game since he entered the league in 2020. So it's super uncharacteristic of him. And I was told this afternoon that, you know, this is a player off day for the Cowboys players in the facility. But CeeDee Lamb, he went into the facility on his own this afternoon and spent quite a bit of time on the jugs machines with, you know, one of the equipment guys. So he's trying to get back into the lab as quick as possible to rectify whatever happened last night, and hope that doesn't happen again for him.
All right, what did you uncover when it comes to Spitgate? Are we in danger of Dak maybe getting some kind of fine here?
I'm not really 100% sure as far from a league perspective. I haven't been able to talk to anybody from the league about this situation. I am curious to see what the league thinks about it at the end of the day. I'd be shocked if Jalen Carter does not get a fine. He won't get a suspension. Unless it's something absolutely egregious. It's very rare that a player that gets ejected gets suspended on top of that. For Dak, it could be a fine, but again, I didn't really see anything that was qualified as a hostile act in my eyes from Dak to maybe warrant a fine. But, we'll see what the league thinks. Obviously, the league has, a lot more eyes and ears on this situation than we do.
Hey, Nick, when it came to the rookie right guard, you and I do a lot of work, Zach, on the draft show. Where were your impressions of how he played?
Yeah, I thought he played well. I would have loved to have seen him up against Jalen Carter, but, there were some moments up against Moro Ojomo where he really had some showed that juice and that power that he had at Alabama, and I thought it was a really encouraging start for Tyler Booker in his first start. If I was ranking, the 5 offensive linemen last night, I'd probably put him 2 or 3 as far as performances. I thought he played pretty well in the run game, paving some holes down the middle, and then in pass protection, I thought he was solid. He wasn't perfect, but I thought he was solid given his debut against that type of front.
Would number 5 be Steele?
Yeah, it probably would be. Although I thought there were some moments in the run game.
Yeah, it was a little tough.
Although there were some moments in the run game that I thought Terrence Steele did really well getting out into space. Talking about that Miles Sanders 49-yard run.
Right.
I mean, he came across the formation
Absolutely
to deck a safety and clear that hole. So, I thought the line as a whole played well last night. And so, to be the number 5 guy in that group, I don't think that's as big of a negative as it maybe would have been last year.
What about Guyton and the 5 pressures that he gave up? Is there, evidence that he's heading in the right direction and he can be a left tackle of the future?
I saw things from him yesterday that we didn't see last year. Those hands have come a lot more inside. It's a lot more narrow hands than he had last year when he got super wide on guys. He was almost hugging them. The fact that he had 0 penalties last night, I think that's a bigger deal than him having 5 pressures in my eyes. That's a step in the right direction for him. The discipline things and him getting his hands into correct usage, I thought those were, positive signs. Sure, those 5 pressures, you don't want those, especially against that type of front. But I thought all in all, considering the circumstances, considering that he hasn't been in a live training camp practice, or he wasn't in a live training camp practice for the last 3.5 weeks, I thought it was a strong start for Tyler Guyton considering.
Nick, what do you know about the approach that they took with the rain delay, being in the locker room? I know Trayvon Diggs was out trying to find some grub, and it seemed like the defense made plenty of adjustments.
Yeah, I thought the defense played really well in the second half overall. And, I talked to some guys in the locker rooms about, like, hey, what were the vibes in the locker room during the rain delay? And everyone was like, well, it was good. We took our pads off, took our helmets off, just kind of sit back and chilled. And, we tried to keep the energy up. And a lot of guys said that they headed back out to the field with a lot more energy and a lot more optimism coming off of that fumble than had they, continued right through that drive. They thought it really benefited them. But, obviously they weren't able to score any offensive points out of that. But, again, I thought the defense played really well there in that second half. At halftime, I was talking with one of the media members about, Matt Eberflus, is this going to work this season? And I think after the game, we found each other again. It was like, well, I think Eberflus is going to be all right. He made some second half adjustments. And so that's a big deal, right? Because, coming off of these, last couple of years, it felt like on either side of the ball, there were times where second half adjustments weren't made, and it was almost things that seemed really obvious and clear up front. But, I thought Eberflus did a really good job of shoring some things up, especially in the run game. Yeah, 123 yards allowed on the ground in the first half. 35 in the second half.
Wow. Yeah, if half times were only an hour in length, we might have a good shot there at that then, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not a Texas high school football halftime.
Exactly.
Every band in the county has to play. But
no doubt, the drill team.
Yeah, 100%.
Get them all out there. What was your assessment on Pickens' debut?
Yeah, I maybe expected him to get a little bit more involved, and I think Pickens maybe did as well. And, we talked to him in the locker room after the game, and he was like, look, my time's going to come. CeeDee was getting open most of the night, and, George Pickens was actually, helping out CeeDee Lamb there after the game and, keeping his head high after those really crucial drops. Overall, you would have liked to have seen more, I think, from a receiving production standpoint. But I think in that first quarter, you saw him get the first reception of the game. Then he drew the DPI later on that second drive, I believe it was. Those are two big things, and that just comes from being a smart player and understanding, the situation. But all in all, at least his presence was noted. I mean, you saw safeties over the top of George Pickens, and it really allowed CeeDee Lamb to find those open lanes. The 13 targets that Lamb had, I'm not sure he has 13 targets if George Pickens is not on the field. So even if he's not showing up in the stat box, he's going to show up in some other places for some other guys.
What do you make of the Eagles? How different are they? Are they a favorite? Do they look like a Super Bowl team to you?
Yeah, I think their secondary is going to need some work, and it kind of reminds me of how I felt about them going into the 2023 season. There's a couple of pieces that they've tried to replace in the secondary. They're still figuring out their cornerback 2 situation in my eyes, and then Adoree Jackson gets hurt on top of that, and they have to flip around to Bennett last night late in the game, and I thought CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens both had their way with him on some one-on-one opportunities. So, I'm curious to see how, Vic Fangio, Howie Roseman, they attack the secondary issue. But they just added another pass rusher in Zadarius Smith, so maybe they try to solve it by getting more guys home in the backfield. They're having to replace some guys up front, too. So I think they're still figuring out what exactly is going on defensively as far as the new faces go. But I think offensively, when they found their stride, I mean, it looked like the team from last year, but when those second half adjustments were made by Eberflus, you wondered about the Landon Dickerson injury, if it maybe affected them up front a little bit more than we expected. But overall, it's a good team. That's a top 5 team in the NFL, even on their worst day. And I thought the Cowboys played up to that level last night.
What are you looking forward to following up with Shoddy on here in about 20 minutes?
Yeah, excited to talk to him about the linebacker play. We talked about that here earlier in this hit. Overall, the feelings coming off of the plane this morning whenever the team got back. I mean, the energy was high in certain areas of the locker room last night, and then in some other areas, guys are kind of beating up on themselves, feeling like they let one get away there. So, I wonder how that's, kind of turned now that everybody's flipped on it, and they're heading into the weekend. Now, granted, the whole team is off this weekend through Sunday. They'll be back in the facility on Monday. But I am curious to see what the vibe is around the team coming out of week 1.
Terrific job as always, sir. Love your social media there on Twitter. Just outstanding information and insights. And have a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you soon.
I appreciate it, fellas. How about we get a series win out there at the Globe? What about that?
Let's do it, baby.
Oh, dude, I'll drink to that.
Let's go.
Do that.